Welcome to Healthy Frontiers. My name is Dr. Bizzoni. I'm a chiropractor, and this show is dedicated to the education of our viewers. And the topic for tonight is pro swing, baseball, and softball. My special guest is Sam Colon. Sam is a 4-year varsity letter winner at Concordia College. He's also an all-region, all-conference scholar athlete. Not the least to say that we're also Cardinal Spellman graduates. Okay, so let's talk about pro swing. So pro swing baseball and softball in Mount Kisco was formed in 2002 by Dan Gray and Barry Perlow. Dan played college ball at SUNY Binghamton and was drafted by the Dodgers. After 2 years with the Dodgers organization, he left due to injuries to begin a career instructing youth baseball and softball. Barry was part owner of Soundview Sports, which opened in 1995 and branched into baseball and softball after partnering with Dan. The success of the Mount Kisco business and the demand for more of the same by the local communities made it possible for Dan and Barry to open a second location in Portchester in 2008. Sam Colon joined Pro Swing at Portchester as general manager in 2010 and became a partner owner in 2014. Sam's role mirrors Dan's as they both run the day-to-day operations, program development, and baseball and softball travel teams at their respective locations. So I'd like to welcome Sam to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure, Sam. Sam, let's talk about kids and baseball and have a good time here. Okay,
Absolutely.
So other than the obvious good feelings that winning can provide, how do you think sports affects a child's general mood?
Well, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, winning and losing, it can bring up certain feelings that from time to time it'll vary. If you're winning, the mood may tend to be more positive.
Right.
If you're losing, you are going to find that your child is most likely to be negative at that moment.
Right.
What I love about sports is that it puts you in a position to have a teachable moment. And, as parents, as coaches, you take the position of being able to guide the youth athlete. And in a situation, whether it involves winning or losing, you want to teach kids how to handle both.
Sure.
Stay somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Not get too high on the highs and too low on the lows.
Right.
And I think that's, something that is extremely important, especially when you factor in the way everyday life is.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
So that's the positiveness that you get from being involved in sports,
Right.
especially a sport like baseball, where in theory you're expected to fail more than you succeed.
Yeah. Right. 250 average, still not that bad, right? 275
At least
average.
in this day and age, 250, if you can hit 30-plus home runs, they take that.
You're still there.
Yeah.
Great. Sam, some people feel that certain kids with ADD or attention deficit disorder,
Right.
or ADHD shouldn't play sports because they won't be able to focus. What has your experience been at Pro Swing?
Well, what I've found is that first, as a coach, knowing that a player does have it, it is helpful because it gives you another perspective in dealing with the athlete. So, for example, I do feel that, if you do have ADHD, stuff like that, that as an instructor, as a coach, you should have more patience. So, when you're dealing in a group setting, for example,
Right.
and you're running a team practice, a lot of the times as a coach, you have to be able to make a point. So let's say if a player is not acting accordingly, it may lead you to have to sit the player down for a moment so that it doesn't take away from the rest of the group. Right. And then as a coach, you can always come back to that player and bring that player in. Right. Knowing ahead of time that a player, let's say, has ADHD, for example, it is helpful because as a coach, it can give you a different angle in dealing with the player. Right. Because one of the things that you have to look at, as a coach, you do have to a certain extent, be a disciplinarian where you are pretty much saying, hey, look, this is how we're going to do things, and we expect you to follow, the rules and the regulations. But at the same time, in the back of your mind, you have to remember that when you sit a kid down, when you, let's say, reprimand the kid, that kid on the other end is going to feel a certain sense of embarrassment, may put their head down, may shy away. And when dealing with a player that has ADHD, you don't want to necessarily put those feelings on that player.
Right.
So it's good to know ahead of time.
Sure.
And it does give you, a little bit more patience in dealing with the situation.
Yep.
But more importantly, it gives you information that you need as a coach to be able to address things in a different manner.
Sure, that's great. So if the team, let's go on to this. If the team loses or the child makes an error, would that provoke feelings of stress and depression?
It does. There's two ways to look at it. If you, let's say, make an error or something like that, you put the weight on your shoulders as a player, and you walk around and you may feel like, I let the team down, I'm the reason why we lost the game. As a coach, you need to be able to recognize that. And in recognizing that, and being able to approach a player and let him or her know, we didn't lose a game because of your one mistake.
Right.
We win and we lose games as a team. In failure, mind you, a win versus a loss, I don't look at failure and measure it from a win-loss standpoint, but kids tend to do that.
Right.
If we lose, we failed. Well, as a coach, you have to recognize when a kid is taking that feeling to another level. And you never want a kid to feel depressed, feel like, hey, this all falls on my shoulders. And as a coach, to address that is basically letting, the player know, look, we're a team here.
Right.
We win, we lose, we fail, we succeed together as one.
Right.
And, I think if you can invoke that into a kid, especially at an early age, they'll move forward knowing that, hey, look, not every, decision I make, not every outcome that gets thrusted upon us is life and death.
Right.
There's more to it,
Sure. And we hope that the parents of all these kids will just follow in the footsteps of what you guys are doing, and as a coach, and then at home reinforce that.
Sure.
You didn't lose the game. It wasn't only you.
Absolutely, and one of the big things that that we look for in coaches and in players and in parents as well. When you play for our organization, we look at the overall experience. So okay, what's the experience that the coach had in coaching his team, in dealing with the parents? What's the experience that the players had, with their teammates, with their coach? But at the same time, from a parent standpoint, what was the overall experience from the parents going to a game, witnessing what's happening around them? Am I surrounded by a bunch of other parents who, when a mistake is made, everyone on the field knows about it? Are they loud? Are they obnoxious? Stuff like that. Yeah. We look for the overall experience, and that's why, from our standpoint, we tend to keep it pretty consistent. And we're looking for the right parents, right players, and right coaches.
That's great. Thanks, Sam. Can the kids get so excited or over-involved that they won't be able to sleep at night? I mean, do they get that high, that strong?
Well, if anything, it's kind of like when you have that sugar rush, let's say, where you have all that activity and then, you're hyper and then the sugar wears off and then you kind of crash and you're, ready to hit the sack. Same thing with sports. I feel that playing sports, it's great, from a health standpoint, but at the same time, I mean, if you're involved and you're doing things, whether it's the training, whether it's the games, at the end of the day, in my opinion, you're in a better position to now rest.
Right.
And then also at the same time, if you have to get up in the morning, we're baseball and softball tournament games. You're playing as early as 8 in the morning.
Right.
So if you're traveling, that means, and most of our tournaments are about an hour away.
Yes.
That means you're in your car at 6 in the morning to arrive to a field at 7 o'clock. So you better bet you're
get up early, get a good night's sleep.
Get a good night's sleep. Get in bed.
Can playing and training for sports help maintain proper health and a healthy weight? What have you seen?
Well, what I've seen, especially, in this day and age, there is, more of a focus being placed on the fitness and health side of things.
Right.
It's one of those things where, if you look around, there are a lot of, personal trainers, whether it's through, an establishment where you can go in and have a membership. You have personal trainers who will visit you at home. Across the table, there's a huge emphasis being placed on it, and you see it. You look at kids at age 9, 10, and, when we're planning out a schedule, when parents want to know, well, when our practice is going to be.
Right.
I need to know because on Tuesday, Thursday, so-and-so meets with his trainer. You're hearing a lot more of that today than ever before.
Sure, and good, because, there's a ton of childhood obesity, and, this can only be a positive factor here with sport.
Absolutely, especially when you don't see yourself being the only one doing it.
Right.
When you're surrounding yourself with, athletes and, youth athletes that are doing the same.
Right.
And then also, from a training standpoint, we do incorporate the physical side of things so that, guess what? If we're running a team, for example, and you feel like you can't keep up with your teammates, it'll push you to want to do more,
right?
Potentially, so that you don't feel like I'm the last kid that's finishing up when we run the bases.
Yeah.
Or
sure.
I'm the one that's most gassed and I need water, sooner before everyone else.
Yeah. That's great. So how can playing sports boost self-confidence if the player keeps losing games?
Well,
say you have a losing team, you got a bad season.
Right. Losing games, it's one of those things where you learn more at times from losing than you do from winning. It's easy to win and walk away and feel like, hey, look, I accomplished, we accomplished everything that we had to, and there's no need to look back and look forward. When you're losing a game, it doesn't mean that everything that happened in that given game, was wrong. There were some positives and stuff like that. But when you lose a game, you're more likely to go back and focus in on, well, what are the things that I could have done differently to help win that game?
Sure.
And I think in sports is very important. Yes, you want to be forward-minded, but, we learn from experiences.
Yeah.
So.
Good. Have you found that playing baseball helps develop leaders or leadership qualities in kids?
Absolutely. It's funny. Years back, I thought about putting a book out there that talked about, baseball, for example, and even softball, and how depending on where you batted in the lineup, you can draw a parallel to companies, organizations. So, for example, when I played, I was a leadoff batter.
Right.
So, as a leadoff batter, you're considered you start the table. You start things going.
Right.
You're the one. You're the table setter. Correct.
Yeah.
And so, I looked at that, and I looked at myself as an individual. And at the time, when I was working in insurance and stuff like that, well, I was that person in business. So I found that, well, a leadoff batter, that's the person that's out there bringing the people in, getting people going, getting the organization going. So who would be that CFO, that CEO? Yeah. Typically, that's your 3, that's your 4 batter. Right. So what I learned that with sports is that not only does it create, leadership qualities, but at the same time, it gives you, in my opinion, a better perspective on being able to deal with things. Right. As opposed to getting so stuck on problems, you tend to be more solution driven.
Okay.
You know, and I think that's a major quality that every great leader has.
Right.
They're driven by coming up with the solution, not just sitting back and dwelling on what the problems are.
Right. That's great. Great. So, do you think that adults who played sports when they were younger are more likely or less likely to live a more active lifestyle than those who did not participate in sports at a young age?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Reason being, you know, what adult doesn't really like to look back at times and talk about things that they've done? I mean, you do it with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
You do it when you're amongst friends. Being involved in sports, it opens up so many doors.
Yeah.
The network of people that you come across from playing in sports, the lifetime, you know, relationships and friendships that are established. But just from a physical well-being standpoint, if you play sports growing up, when you get older, it'll put you in a better position to, number one, either continue playing sports. Number two, you know, from a health and fitness standpoint, you may be in a situation where, guess what? You're more aware of the exercise part of things, the nutritional side of things.
Right.
So to answer your question, I would say that it definitely helps, especially in your adult years.
Great, great. So how do you feel about kids participating in multiple sports? Now, this is a question that, comes up quite often. And does the age of a child matter? So let's take the first piece of that. So what do you think about kids playing just one sport versus multiple sports as they're growing up?
Well, the big thing here, you have to listen to your child.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've been around a lot of kids who they're going from one practice to another. They're going from one game to another. I've had kids who they're playing their baseball. We're doing our winter training indoors, but while we're doing our winter training indoors, they're also playing basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're going from a practice indoors to a basketball game. Okay. Now, when you're in the fall, for example, this time of year, you have fall baseball and softball.
Right.
You have soccer.
Right.
In addition to soccer, you have players who even do football as well.
Right.
So the big thing, in my opinion, you have to listen to your child. If you find yourself running around and it's like, well, where did my day go? Well, your day went pretty much in the car and on the field. How is your kid reacting to this? Is your kid being given the opportunity to be a kid?
Right.
You know, and, you know, my daughter, for example, she's turning 8 in January, and she's a very gifted athlete. I like to say that it comes from me, but, you know, what I find with her, and I love this. One day, you know, we have her lined up to play softball, and she was doing gymnastics, and she was good at gymnastics. She flat out told me one day right after school, she said, "Hey, Dad, look, if you think that I need to be doing something every day after school, I don't have to. I like being able, you know, to come home and relax a little bit." So for her, she likes the idea of doing one thing at a time. Right. So when we're done with softball in a couple of weeks, she wants to jump into tennis. Right. However, she didn't want to do both things at the same time.
Right. Okay.
So listening to your child is important.
Very important. Great. Some parents feel that the coaches should try and get kids to not feel badly when they lose. Others think that kids have to learn how to deal with it. Where do you come out on this?
Well, I don't think making a kid feel bad is the approach you take. I think what you want to the approach you want to take as a coach, you want to make the player aware of, okay, this is how we lost the game. Okay, you want to make the player aware of that feeling that player has. Okay, well, what is that feeling that you have? We lost. How do you feel? If that player's telling you, you know, I feel bad, I feel crappy, as a coach, you don't jump on the player, or players for that matter, and make them feel any worse. What you do is you take what they're feeling and you turn it into a positive.
Right.
And the way you turn it into a positive, very easily you could say, look, we lost today. We weren't able to execute. The stuff that we weren't able to execute are the same things that we worked on in practice this past week. What were we doing in practice this past week? Were you guilty of fooling around? Raise your hand if as a team you felt we fooled around too much.
Mm-hmm.
You might find the kid not wanting to raise his hand because he doesn't want to be alone.
Right.
But most of the times what you'll see happen
Mm-hmm.
is more than one hand go up, and before you know it, all of the hands are raised up, and you go back to that, and then you're able to remind them the next time you practice, hey, let's not get lost in this.
Right.
And just that's
reinforcement.
Positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
Best way to do it.
Great. So it's important for kids to get up earlier and lose the extra 15 minutes of sleep in order to have a better breakfast?
Absolutely. Personally, I'm a big breakfast guy.
Right.
And it starts your day off.
Right.
And here's the thing. And I'm going to use tournament play as an example.
Please.
If you're in a tournament, and in softball, for example, typically their first day, they play 3 games in one day. In baseball, you'll play 2 games, right? And if you have a back-to-back
Mm-hmm.
game, first game at 8, second game at 10, what you'll find is you'll have people, players, families, trying to stuff the players' faces in between both those games,
Right.
which is not good.
No.
You're better off, okay, let me go with a big breakfast. I wouldn't say an hour before the game. I would say more like 90 minutes before a game.
Right.
If you're traveling to a tournament, for example, and you're not staying at a hotel, then it could be one of those things where you're eating on the road or,
Right.
And when it's all said and done, once you complete your second game, that's the time for you then to have lunch. But it all starts with your breakfast.
Right. Strong breakfast. I'm
A
always
strong breakfast.
big believer in that myself.
Absolutely.
Great. So, is it part of the coach's job to constantly be positive and to encourage all those involved, like parents and other fans, to also be unconditionally positive?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the thing. What I tend to see, parenting is not an easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I have 3 of my own children, and it's not easy.
No.
And, sometimes you may look out there and you feel you need that help. Most of the time as a parent, you don't want to disappoint your child.
Right.
So I think it's important that as a coach, you help with decision making as it pertains to the sport that the kid is playing. So as an example, if I see a parent come down on a player on the field from the stands after making a mistake, well, if I'm not taking that approach,
Right.
you shouldn't be taking that approach.
Right.
So that's
Exactly.
a conversation that, and I believe that majority of the parents are going to respect you more if you can go to that parent, and when no one's around,
Right.
pull the parent to the side and say, look, it's not going to work.
Right.
It doesn't help.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing it from the stands, you're enraged, you're upset. What you're probably missing is your child's reaction.
Mm-hmm.
What's the head doing? What are the shoulders doing? What
Right.
does he or she do next at bat on the field? Positive reinforcement.
Great.
And that does come from the coaches. And as a coach, you can expect the same positive energy to come from the parents and also the teammates.
Great. And here's our last question now,
Sure.
Sam. Okay, so should coaches and parents assume the responsibilities that participation in sports calls for, like maintaining their equipment, uniforms, and schedules, for example, or should sports be used as a way for kids to learn and demonstrate responsibly on their own, even though it may be a lot of work for them?
I think sports should be used as a way of, you're teaching a team concept,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you're stressing the individual.
Right.
You know, and what I mean by that is, you know, as a parent, okay, you want your child, your young athlete to be self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
you drop him or her off, okay, well, who's responsible for the bag, the helmet, you know, their glove? It should be the player. At the end, guess what? The way I was brought up, if you're left behind your glove, guess what? You're going to have to use your allowance.
Right.
It wasn't going to be mom or dad going out there and buying a new glove, a new bat. You know, and I guess it puts a little bit more ownership. And by doing that, you're also helping build more character.
Right.
As opposed to the player thinking, hey, look, don't worry about it. You know, mom and dad has me covered.
Yeah.
No, it's stress the individual.
Great. Great. Sam, that was terrific. I know your place, Pro Swing, is a first-class professional facility. I've heard so many great things from my own patients that have participated. So I want to welcome you and thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Truly appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you on the next show.